Hi, my name is Riva Villa. I am the director of the Shelton Upward Bound program, and I am the instructor for the Bridge class for the year 2020. I will be reading sections from the Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz for the purposes of instruction. Each student has a book that we have purchased for them, and this audio reading will be simply to supplement the visual reading that they'll be doing with an audio reading to help them access their course materials. For today, I will be reading the chapter Cortes in Difficulties. There was never a time when we were not subject to surprises so dangerous that but for God's help they would have cost us our lives. No sooner had we set up the image of Our Lady on the altar and said Mass than Huichilobos and Tizcatlipoca seemed to have spoken to their papas, telling them that they intended to leave their country, since they were so ill-treated by the Teules. They said that they did not wish to stay where these figures and the cross had been placed, nor would they stay unless we were killed. This, they said, was their answer, and the papas need expect no other, but must convey it to Moctezuma and all his captains, so that they might at once attack us and kill us. Their gods also observed that they had seen us break up the gold that was once kept in their honor and forge it into ingots, and warned the Mexicans that not only had we imprisoned 5 great caciques, but were now making ourselves masters of their country. They recited many more of our misdeeds in order to incite their people to war. Wishing us to hear what his gods had said, Moctezuma sent Orteguilla to our captain with the message that he wished to speak to him on very serious business. The page said that Moctezuma was very sad and agitated, and that on the previous night and during much of the day, many papas and important captains had been with him holding secret discussions which he could not overhear. On receiving this message, Cortes hurried to the place where Moctezuma was, taking with him Cristobal de Olid, the captain of the guard, and 4 other captains, also Doña Marina and Jerónimo de Aguilar. All paid great respect to the great Moctezuma, who addressed them in these words. My lord Malinche and captains, I am indeed distressed at the answer which our Teules have given to our papas, to me, and to all my captains. They have commanded us to make war on you, and kill you, and drive you back across the sea. I have reflected on this command, and think it would be best that you should at once leave the city before you are attacked, and leave no one behind. This, my lord Malinche, you must certainly do, for it is in your own interest. Otherwise you will be killed. Remember that your lives are at stake. Cortes and our captains were distressed and even somewhat alarmed, which was not surprising, for the news was so sudden and Moctezuma was so insistent that our lives were in the greatest and immediate danger. The matter was clearly urgent. Cortes replied by thanking him for the warning and saying that at the moment he was troubled by 2 things. That he had no ships in which to depart, since he had ordered those in which we came to be broken up, and that Moctezuma would have to accompany us so that our emperor might see him. He begged him as a favor, therefore, to restrain his papas and captains until 3 ships could be built in the sand dunes. This course, he argued, would be to their advantage, for if they began a war, they would all be killed. And to show that he really meant to build these ships without delay, he asked Moctezuma to tell his carpenters to go with 2 of our soldiers, who were expert ship builders, and cut wood near the coast. On hearing Cortes say that he would have to come with us and visit the emperor, Moctezuma was even sadder than before. He said he would let us have the carpenters and urged Cortes to hurry up and not waste time in talk but to get to work. In the meantime, he promised to tell his papas and captains not to foment disturbances in the city, and to see that Huichilobos was appeased with sacrifices, though not of human lives. After this excited conversation, Cortes and our captain took their leave of Moctezuma, and we were all left in great anxiety, wondering when the fighting would begin. Cortes immediately sent for Martin Lopez, the ship's carpenter, and Andres Nunez, and the Indian carpenters whom Moctezuma had lent us, and after some discussion about the size of the 3 vessels to be built, he ordered Lopez to start work at once and get them ready. For all that was necessary in the way of iron and blacksmith's tackle, tow, caulkers, and tar was to be found at Villarrica. So they set out and cut the wood near the coast, and after making calculations and templates, hastily began to build the ships. Meanwhile, we in Mexico went about in great depression, fearing that at any moment we might be attacked. Our Tlaxcalan auxiliaries and Doña Marina told Cortes that this was imminent, and the page Orteguilla was always in tears. We all kept on the alert and placed a strong guard on Moctezuma. I say that we were on alert, but I do not have to repeat this so often, since we never took off our armor, gorgets, or leggings by night or day. Some may ask when we slept, and what our beds were like. They were nothing but a little straw and mat, and anyone who had a curtain put it underneath him. We slept in our armor and sandals, and with our weapons close beside us. The horses stood saddled and bridled all day, and everything was so fully prepared that at a call to arms we were ready at our posts and waiting. We posted sentinels every night, and every soldier did his guard duty. There was something else I would say, though I do not like to boast. I grew so accustomed to going about armed and sleeping in the way I have described that after the conquest of New Spain, I kept the habit of sleeping in my clothes and without a bed. I slept better that way than on a mattress. Even when I go to the villages of my encomienda, I do not take a bed, or, if I sometimes do, it is not because I want it, but because some gentlemen are traveling with me, and I do not wish them to think I do not possess a good bed. But I always lie down fully dressed. What is more, I can only sleep for a short time at night. I have to get up and look at the sky and stars and walk about for a bit in the dew, and this without putting a cap or handkerchief on my head. I am so used to it that, thank God, it does me no harm. I have said all this so that my readers shall know how we, the true conquistadors, lived, and how accustomed we became to our arms and to keeping watch. Meanwhile, with backing from Spain, Diego Velázquez went about organizing a fleet which was to follow Cortes and either kill or capture him and his soldiers. The fleet was 19 ships strong and carried 1,400 soldiers under the command of Pamfilo Narvaez. Narvaez met and was joined by 3 soldiers whom Pizarro had left behind to farm and prospect, and was then visited by some secret envoys of Moctezuma's who were impressed by the size of his expedition. Moctezuma sent presents to Narvaez, and for 3 days Cortes knew nothing about it. One day when our captain went to make his usual state visit to Moctezuma, he noticed, after the usual civilities, that Moctezuma appeared more cheerful and happy. He asked him how it was, and Moctezuma replied that his health was better. But when Cortes paid him a second visit on the same day, the prince was afraid that he had learned about Narvaez's ships. So to get the advantage of our captain and to avoid suspicion, he said, "Lord Malinche, just a moment ago, some messengers came to tell me that 18 or more ships with a great many men and horses have arrived at the port where you disembarked. They brought me a picture of it all painted on cloths, and seeing you visiting me for a second time today, I thought you had come to bring me the same news, for now you will not need to build ships. But you have told me nothing about it, so I have been annoyed with you, on the other hand, for keeping me in ignorance, and delighted, on the other hand, at the arrival of your brothers. For now you can all return to Spain without more discussion." When Cortes heard about the ships and saw the painting on the cloth, he rejoiced greatly. "Thank God who provides for us at the right time," he said, and we soldiers were so pleased that we could not keep quiet. The horsemen rode skirmishing around, and musket shots were fired, but Cortes grew very thoughtful, for he knew quite well that the fleet had been sent against him and us by the governor Diego Velázquez. Being a wise man, he told us soldiers and captains what he felt, and by great gifts of gold and promises to make us rich, persuaded us to stand by him. He did not yet know who was in command of the fleet, but we were highly delighted with the news, and with the gold he had given us by way of gratuity, since it came from his own property, and not from what should have fallen to our share. Our Lord Jesus Christ was indeed sending us help and assistance. Having learnt all Cortes' dispositions from Pizarro's 3 followers who had joined him, Narvaez demanded the surrender of Villarrica. Sandoval, however, sent away his old and crippled soldiers in preparation for a fight, and arrested Narvaez's 3 envoys when they threatened him. He then bundled these 3, the priest Guevara and the notary Vergara, and a relative of Diego Velázquez called Amaya, off to Mexico under escort. Dazzled by the richness of the country they passed through, they were even more overwhelmed by the gracious reception which Cortes gave them and the sight of Mexico itself. Wheedled by bribes and flattery, on their return to Narvaez's camp, they began to persuade Narvaez's men to come over to Cortes' side. At the same time, Cortes wrote putting himself at Narvaez's disposition and begging him not to let the Indians see any divergence of view among the Spaniards. Bribes and presents of gold soon produced dissension among Narvaez's followers, but the captain himself obstinately persisted in his hostility to Cortes. A few of his men deserted to Sandoval. Narvaez then moved on to Zempoala, where he extracted from the fat chief all the treasure that Cortes had left in his charge, and from there began to march on to Mexico. Cortes then decided to attack him, leaving Pedro de Alvarado and the least reliable soldiers to guard Moctezuma. The Mexican prince, who was playing a double game, sent gold and supplies to Narvaez and attempted to dissuade Cortes from attacking him. After an argument with a notary who attempted to serve writs on him, Cortes sent first the Mercedarian friar and then Juan Velázquez to win him friends in Narvaez's camp. His guile succeeded, but at the same time he bought a number of long, copper-tipped lances from the Chinantec's to be used against Narvaez's horsemen, and trained his men to handle them. He then made a surprise attack on Narvaez, whose men quickly lost their artillery. The night was wet, and they were not used to the country. Narvaez himself was wounded and lost an eye, and his men failed to defend the quays at Zempoala, which seemed to offer them a natural stronghold. 5 men were killed on Narvaez's side and 4 on Cortes. Narvaez's men then passed with greater or less willingness to Cortes' side, and many of them were permitted to settle in the country. Cortes insisted that his men should return the horses and other valuables which they had captured, a demand which provoked some resistance on his own side. One of Narvaez's followers, a black man, was suffering from smallpox, and a severe epidemic spread among the Indians, who did not know this disease. The victory of Zempoala, however, was quickly followed by very bad news from Mexico. Just at the moment of victory, news came from Mexico that Pedro de Alvarado was besieged in his quarters, which the Mexicans had set alight in 2 places, killing 7 of his men and wounding many others. He sent to demand assistance in great urgency and haste, and entrusted the message to 2 Tlaxcalans who brought no letter. The letter, however, was brought shortly afterward by 2 other Tlaxcalans. God knows how this bad news depressed us. We began our journey back to Mexico by forced marches, leaving Narvaez and his captain Salvatierra as prisoners at Villarrica, in charge of Rodrigo Rangel, who was made commander of the place and was left to look after not only the prisoners but many of Narvaez's followers who were recovering from their wounds. As we were about to start, 4 important chieftains arrived from whom the great Moctezuma had sent to Cortes to complain about Pedro de Alvarado. With tears streaming from their eyes, they said that Alvarado had come out of his quarters with all the soldiers whom Cortes had sent him, and for no reason at all had fallen on their caciques and dignitaries, who were dancing and celebrating a festival in honor of their idols Huichilobos in Tezcatlipoca, for which they had Alvarado's permission. Many Mexicans had been killed and wounded, and in defending themselves they had killed 6 of our soldiers. In reply to their bitter complaints against Alvarado, Cortes merely said in some disgust that he would go straight to Mexico to put things right. When the messengers brought their answer to the great Moctezuma, he is said to have taken it very badly and flown into a great rage. Cortes also promptly sent letters to Pedro de Alvarado, advising him to make sure that Moctezuma did not escape, and telling him that we were coming by forced marches. At the same time, he informed him of our victory over Narvaez, about which Moctezuma knew already. So that is the end of the chapter, Cortes and Difficulties. Thank you for listening. I'm hoping to post more videos of readings from this book soon. so keep an eye out.